Hello and welcome to video 4 of the CAA series in the IPControl 16 evaluation. And we're going to pick up where we left off last time. And that was, we were at the get next available address. So the next workflow that we're going to take a look at real quick is the get resource. And again, the get resource record is effectively to get a domain resource record or to get a record level resource record. So what we're going to do is this allows us to specify type, and one of the advantages of our APIs for IPControl and DNS records specifically is we use a single API for all of the different record types. And the type is just a property that tells it the type, and we give it the data and the values and others. So instead of having a different API for SRV and text and CNAME and A, it's one, and it covers all. And I've seen other external API providers and services that have one for each and every API, and that's a little overkill. So what we're going to do here is we need to, again, I'm going to modify this again to the way I want to read this and would suggest you do the same. But in some regards, make sure that it works within your environment. If you want to use the gets and you want to do those, then we'll take a look at doing that. So we're going to do a post, and this is going to post in the resource record data. And what we need to have is effectively a zone, server, type, domain, owner, and our data. So these owner type are going to be required. We're going to get the login. We're going to go ahead and remove this since that does that check. And I've already dragged a debug into it here, but let's drag one up here so we can see what's coming out. And I'm going to deploy that real quick. And then what I want to do here is I want to construct in a new API. It's going to be based on this. So let's see how I can structure this best. Let's do it this way. All right, so we're just going to clone this. I'll just rename it. It's the easiest way to do it. And this will be IPC get RR. And I think it's just RR. I don't think, yeah, just RR. And then in our body, we need to do this. Okay, so the name of the zone, the resource records required to get zone resource records. So we're not going to do zone, so we'll leave that as it is. The server, we're not doing a zone either. And let's do type. And how about MX, just as an example? Let's see if there's, well, I don't have any MX records, so let's see if there's any resource records there. Domain name, I have the record already. And these we'll take out. The owner section of the resource record. Now it says the owner is required. And so to get this, we're going to need to find a owner. So let's do that real quick and let's see what we have. Now on the get functions, it requires that you know this data. When we do an export, we can put filters in, and those filters can then determine what records are going to be pulled out of there. So for this particular one, let's just grab, how about just router 2? We'll just take this simple one here, type A. And that's the owner. So the domain applied to the owner makes up the FQDN, type, username, and it looks like we have what we need. Let's just give it a try. Error, missing type. Okay. Let's take a look at the debug here. Yeah, need to make sure we change this to credentials, that's why. So once again, if we are Wiring the login node directly into another node for processing, you'll want to change that output, because otherwise, whatever we pass into this input, this login then overwrites that payload if it outputs the payload. So we need to make sure we output to a different variable. The APIs know how to do that. They know how to pick up the value and where it's at. So once it's defined, we should be okay. And there we go. So now we have our record, and that's kind of what we expected. And again, we have the ID with this information. So there are some APIs that allow you to get data by ID. So you can specify this ID value if you don't know the rest. But if we need to edit any of record data, if we want to change the data, the owner, the TTL, any of those, the comments, we pass it back in as the full structure. So we need that information out of there, the ID out of it to do that. So that's a get. That's real simple. And let's go take a look at another one here. So here's the add resource record. Now a little bit different here, and we might need to think this one through as we do it, because there might be some additionals. So what are they doing here? They're doing an add resource record. Let's change this to post. We've got it. Let's do workflow, IPCA Let's get rid of that. Let's do credentials. All right, and then there's validate data. Well, we'll have to keep our eye on this, because it may require that we have additional data that we don't have. Now, this looks like it's doing the checks right. So if it's zone and it doesn't have a server, if there's no data, we're not going to have data. So we probably want to skip that check. So let's do this. Owner domain, we do have this. We're not going to do data. So again, if we don't have the data in there, I want to look up by anything without the data. It's going to cause an error. So this is something we need to look at here again. So in each of these things, they have these checks. So if there's no data, and we're not passing in a data, we're just saying, I want to pass in a user, an owner, the domain name, and the type, and I want it to go out and get the rest of it. So let's see if that will work for that. Or actually, this is the import. So this is the import. Apologies. Let's change that back. So we do need to have data in this record. And we do need to have data here. So we really should use these. So we'll go ahead and keep that then. And then change three rules is going out and doing some cloning the rec body. And this is where it's using the JSON expressions, JSONata, excuse me. So you'll see here it's clone, and it's cloning the body. And we probably don't need to do that since we're pasting the payload into it already, but we'll let it do it anyway. And then it's going to create a resource record type and domain. Okay, and let's see what that does. And let's just do this. And before, okay, so it looks like then, if it doesn't have a get, it tries to look it up first. If it doesn't have it, it throws an error, and then it goes to the add resource. So let's go back and do this again. So let's take a look at the documentation and for the add. And what we need to have are effectively what we already had. And let's expand that again, and let's go down here. So let's do duplicate here again. This is IPC add RR, get RR, add RR. Okay, and then the body, okay, so we don't need a zone unless we're doing a zone record. Now, zone records would be your glue records, like NSA record, which we don't need to do at this level here. Server, the same. We're not importing a zone record, but we are going to import a domain record. So the data is going to be required, and that's going to be our A record. So we're going to make one up here. I'm going to say router CAA DC1. And I should have a name policy for it. Actually, we're going to take that out as we don't need a host name. Owner, resource, record type, A. Get rid of this. Always under commas. Now here we need the domain type. So whether you create it internal or external, default, and you would use that here. And I believe mine are all internal when we set that up. And what else do we need? Let's do TTL. Let's do 300. And it's a string, notice it's not a number. So we want to make sure we do that. So comments, I don't know why comment would be true. That should be a string. All right, so I think that almost does it. Let's do data now, and that's going to be our IP address. And let's do 10, 10, 0, 15, just to do it. Okay, let's try this. Let's save it. And let's go back up here, and let's watch this debug for a bit. And let's just see what happens. I want to just fire it off, see what happens here. Missing domain. All right. I thought we had domain. So let's do this too. And as you'll see, when we're dealing with this, sometimes, it's just a matter of trial and error. You just have to, effectively see how the input is, work through it, see if there's any error, see if there's something missing, a name has changed, a parameter is missing a value, or, something to that effect. And it's usually just the simplest thing. So I'm going to go through this again just to verify it one more time. And we have our owner. So owner is the name of the resource. We got it. Resource record type. Yep, spelled right. A. Domain. So we had domain name from the other, and it's domain here. Domain type is right, and let's try that again. Okay. Now we're still missing resource rec type. Is it looking for rec type or record type? Resource record type. Defaults to this, defaults to that. Resource rec type. And that still looks for a type in there. So let's do this. Let's keep the type in this because it looks like it's using a get, which has a different input, and then it's using a post to do that for the input. Using resource rec type. So let's change this instead of record. Let's do rec and see if it accepts it. Okay, well now we've got an error, so that's a little bit different. All right, so I went ahead and paused that for a minute because we were getting some errors and I was getting them continuously, and I had to go back and make a couple double checks here, and I didn't want to make this video get too long. So there are a few things that I found. When we're looking at this documentation here for the ad, it says record type, which I found is incorrect. So what we really need to have is we need to have rec type, and then we need to have the rec class. So these two, A was misspelled, so that would be incorrect in the documentation. We'll need to update that. And then the rec class, the same. Now the rest of these addresses and values, I had added one already, so this will be number 2 here. And I changed a few things. So let's go back through what I had done. The first is with the error. When we go to look up the resource record, if it doesn't have an error, I told it to delete all of these error messages and codes and values that went with that message. I just had it do a clean delete to make sure that it removed the status code and everything else before it added. After the delete, because the resource record add is just simply going to give you a null value, but it gives you a header of 200 indicating OK. And one of the value I see as the value of node red is that I can modify that. I can change this to anything I want to. And I can go in and provide these details back to the calling process. I can embellish the data more. I can provide other details that are going to tell their calling client more detail about what happened versus just here's a code and just accept that that was okay. So we might want to pull other detail, pull everything back in it that can be searched in, or even go out and get the details. But this is something that's of value here. And when we get back into some of these other flows, and we're almost done, I'm going to do two more videos out of this, maybe get down to the pools and the subnet lists. And then we're going to go back and kind of work over some of these additional flows, add some additional logic to it that might be used in your process, in your POCs. So in this particular case, then, I changed the payload so that in the output, I'll at least get some response. If there's an error adding it, it'll generate an error, and this will set that payload to the error, so I'll know that that was an error as well. And in the add of this, then, when I add it, it's just simply going to give me either a duplicate error or it's going to say add. If I try to add it again, it should say that there's a duplicate, and that would be the mirror message that we would look for. And then this is all assigned into the domain, so we can just quickly look at it, and you'll see our record here. All right, so that is the domain record. And I am going to, I think, stop here and create another video to finish up with the address pools for DHCP. We'll go out and do some things like the list subnets, list devices, which are good. And then I'll have another video, which I'll come back and talk about the callouts, which we touched on briefly when we first started this process and set up the CAA and the call out endpoints. And now we can start looking at what that does, maybe formatting it a little differently. So I'm going to call this a video for the day, and then I'm going to go ahead and bring another in, and we'll finish up these workflows, and then we'll kind of go through some other examples. Thanks again for joining, and I'll talk to you soon.